respects, as a performance entity, it's almost meditative. So that there's not a lot of action, at least in the Dengaku portions. There's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of story being told. It's more of a reflection on a condition. Okay? And that's kind of hard to grasp, I think, for Westerners, because we're used to being, let's get drawn into the story and let's follow the storyline. This performance is meant to sort of show you a meditative reflection of yourself and things that you may encounter in your life.
So the No theater, compared to the Greek and Roman, it seems like from what you're saying, they didn't really have difficulty entertaining their folks, like as in, oh, well, now we have to do short plays, and now we have to, run around naked and do this and that. Well, I'm guessing in Japan.
Well, and we're also not performing in amphitheaters for 15,000 people. They're performing in a much more contained setting that is meant to be much more intimate. So, in that respect, there's a natural difference there.
So was it like village to village, or because I'm guessing
it is mostly centered. Actually, segueing to my next point, it's mostly centered around the Buddhist temples, and the temples then sprouted these communities. Now, the popularity, I'll get to your question in a second, the popularity of these performances inside the temples started to spill into the communities, so that there were actual performance guilds that sprouted up, because most of this, what was being performed by the Buddhist monks. And once they started to sort of spill to the outside of the temples, then these artisan guilds of actual actors who were starting to be trained to perform in this style popped up, and the monks said, okay, great, you guys take care of this, and great, we'll pay you, and we can move on to other things. So it literally evolved from the monks performing to these actual sort of artisan guilds. And in fact, throughout ancient Japan, there were 5 of them. There were 5 sort of no schools licensed for training purposes, 4 of which are still functioning today with the same sort of hereditary lineage running them. Okay, David.
Just kind of popped into my head just now, but in Love Suicides, the servant girl gets up to for the planters and just stark naked, but that's portrayed by a man. How is that handled? Because I guess in the Roman times we would assume, yeah, they would be naked if that was the
well, I think the definition, and this is my interpretation, but the definition of stark naked in the script has a very different actual process in performance. When I saw it, it was just somebody in a sheer negligee that was backlit, so all we saw was silhouette. So these performing arts guilds, known as ZOC, sprout up around 1270. This is where it starts to kind of really take an official form. And so the transition time from the emergence of No theater out of the Shintoist tradition, as the Buddhist influence starts to take over, really around about 1100 or so. So within the next 100, 150 years is really when we have these sort of like structured performing arts guilds for the No theater that developed into the what we saw. So these guilds were exclusively licensed based upon the temple and the community that they were serving. And again, those were passed on to generations, just as if they were, ruling monarchs that passed the family rule down. This is the same sort of concept in these authorizations to perform. Initially, these did include female performers, but as a later decree by Shogun about I want to say, a couple hundred years later, decreed that females performing on stage was an obscenity. And so females were no longer allowed to portray the roles, and therefore it turned back into males performing all of the roles. So there's a little bit of progressivism there, but of course that got taken away. So most of these, you don't necessarily have to write all these down, but most of these are based in the notion of a very structured class system. Most of the stories come out of people's identity that is associated with these class systems. So the shogun was sort of the warrior chief, you know, feudal lord, if you will. Samurai was their protected warriors. These two are the primary features in most of the No plays, or at least in some way, shape, or form, they are represented. Or I shouldn't say that. They make appearances, but the most popular theme is samurai becoming a ronin. And a ronin is somebody who has lost their master because of some kind of disgrace or some kind of falling out or some kind of mistake that was made, and they end up sort of wandering purposeless between these two classes. Now, it was kind of a prestige thing early in the No theater experience for the shoguns to sponsor these performances. And as time went on, and these guys, actually it's supposed to be daimyo, sorry, these sort of underlings of the shoguns wanted to show them up a little bit. They started to produce and sponsor their own performances. So these are largely performances that are for, you know, I'm going to say small invited crowds. So most of the time, you're talking about these people that are attending the performances. But there are, as we see when we get to Love Suicides, you know, we are representing the merchant class and artisan and craftsman. So there's certainly different places of social setting for these plays. Okay? But these people attending, particularly the lower two, not a regular occurrence. It would happen sometimes if the other performances weren't filled up or something like that.
What do you mean by lesser warrior?
I'm sorry?
Lesser warrior.
This one? So they are servant or subservient to the samurai.
They're still a warrior.
So they're like corporals, where these guys are captains, sort of thing. So in performance, you have the lead character who is the shite. And as I sort of indicated, their stage positioning dictates the nature of their movements. These guys are masked. They're always masked. They are not necessarily speaking dialogue through the masks. Oftentimes that is still intoned from a narrator on the outside. So if you think of Love Suicides, if that was a no play, and in fact it was a doll play, as I mentioned first, but I'll get to doll theater in a moment, the lead characters are not necessarily speaking, the narrator is speaking and intoning all of the dialogue. The supporting characters, the waki, are unmasked, unmasked. So we are seeing their actual faces, as opposed to, this was considered a much more prestigious performance entity to have the lead character be masked. Okay? And when I say their stage position dictates the movement, as I said, when it's time for the lead characters to speak, they would sort of address towards what would be kind of the broadest angle of the audience. But again, this is very deliberate. It's rather contemplative, does not move quickly, and is meant to sort of elicit a state of meditation. So, as I said, these were all sort of based in some respect upon the teachings of Zen Buddhism. And the narrator serves as the chorus and gives the dialogue as well as being supported by music. Now, most of the places that I've looked this up says this is dad and this is the son. I have one of them say this is their brothers. So I don't know which is accurate, but I'm going to go with the father and son. And that this guy, Hanami Kyotsuga, Ziami Motokiyo, that was fun to say. Motokiyo. They are kind of the anchors of no structure. He is primarily an author of the 241 known extant no plays. He is credited with authoring over 100 of them. Okay? And this guy is known as the premier shite performer throughout the, not shitty, shite. Performer throughout the sort of anchor development of the No Theater. And there are publications attributed to each one of these guys that sort of lays out the standards, some of which that I've just been kind of revealing and talking to you about. So these guys are two very key figures in the emergence of No Theater. So what is, has anybody heard this term before, Yugen? Senna, I know you have.